So today we are going to talk about language classes, but not the ones you attend during the day at school, but instead we'll talk about the language classes which you pay for and that usually happen in the evening. I thought my opinion on language courses would be useful to you because I am a language tutor in the evening, which means that I teach French, and then I also take a language class in the evening as well, so I feel like I'm in a good position to talk about language classes. I will make this video as general as possible, so if you've watched it and you still have questions, then feel free to drop them in the comment section below. I thought the best format for this video was to ask 5 questions, which I will of course answer. So let's start with the first question. So my first question is, who should take language courses? I think a language course can be very beneficial to you if you have no knowledge of the language or very little knowledge, and if you don't really have any experience in learning languages and you don't really know where to start. Usually, nowadays, language courses emphasize on basic skills like being able to introduce yourself, use basic greetings, talk about your environment, ordering food in a restaurant, etc. So they're quite a good starting point if you don't know where to start. Now, if you already have a solid knowledge of your language, or maybe you're intermediate, but you feel like you need a bit of consolidation, whether a course will be beneficial to you or not will very much depend on your level in that language. Personally, I think that if you have a good conversational level in the language, maybe you should look into conversation classes, or maybe there's material online that might help you. If, however, you feel like you need to consolidate on everything, even the basics, then why not? I think language courses can be a good thing for you. But don't forget that language courses are not a miracle solution, and sometimes a bit of practice is what you really need instead of attending classes. Question number 2. Can you really commit to the class? This is such an important question because I often have students who sign up and then they realize that in the end they can't actually attend because the commute is too long, or they don't have time anymore, or it clashes with other aspects of their lives. So they just drop out. I mean, don't worry, I don't blame them. I totally get it. But I think if you're going to sign up to a language course, you need to make sure you will be able to attend it, otherwise it will waste both your money and your time, which is a huge shame. So making sure you can attend the course can include making sure the school is not too far from your work or your house, or whether based on your work or life commitments, for example, making sure you can actually attend regularly on that specific day in the week. If you feel like you're going to miss maybe 20 or 25% or more of the classes, then potentially you should consider looking into having a language course on another day, or maybe consider online classes if that's more convenient with your timetable. Now, if you're 100% sure you can commit, you also need to think about how much time you will have during the week to actually practice what you've learned in the class. Yep, just attending the language course is not going to be enough. You also need to allocate some time where you will practice what you've learned, complete the homework, maybe doing some speaking practice if you can. If you don't, the following will happen. You will learn lots of new vocabulary, grammar in the lesson, and then the following week you will remember maybe 20 or 30% of it if you're lucky. This happens all the time with my students, especially at the beginning of the courses when my students don't realize that it's important to do the practice and complete the homework if they want to make sure they don't forget everything. This will really make a difference, trust me. Number 3. What else will you do to learn that language? As much as I find my classes useful, and I do my best to make the experience of students learning the language as good as possible, I also think it's important not to limit yourself only to your class as a way to learn the language. If possible, find something else to complete your language course. For example, and depending on your level of course, you can consider using some apps to practice the language, or find a conversation partner, for example. The reason why I say this is because as great as your teachers might be, no language learning method is perfect, and that's why it's important to use more than one method to learn a language. So the weaknesses of one language method will be counteracted by another one. Typically in language courses, and it depends on which ones you attend, there will be either not enough listening, or not enough speaking, or not enough writing, etc. So if that is the case, you need to find another method to compensate for the lack of listening or speaking or writing. So let's say you want to practice listening, then you can look into a podcast or any kind of audio material to help you practice your listening skills. Number 4. will you actually enjoy being in the classroom? Again, that's a very important question because for many people, a classroom setting is not really for them. Even it can bring back bad memories of when they were at school. I guess for this one, you kind of need to sort of think of whether you like the idea of being part of a group, which will mean you won't be the center of the teacher's attention. For some people, that's fine. They don't like to stand out from the crowd, really. But for others, they might feel like they're not getting enough feedback on their work, or they want to participate more or get more speaking time. So in that situation, maybe a classroom setting is not ideal. That's why taking into account the maximum numbers of students in a group is important. Some courses have a maximum of 3 to 4 students, others up to 16. So before you sign up to a language course, make sure you know how many students there will be in the class with you. But an advantage of being in a classroom setting can be that it's a great way to socialize because you will be in a room with people that have at least one thing in common, the language you're learning. So that can be a nice way to meet new people and maybe practice the language with them. Personally, I believe that some of my students take the language course as a way to, of course, learn the language, but also to socialize. And there's definitely nothing wrong with that. After all, languages should be a social experience, in my opinion. A third point that I'd like to make in this video is that a language setting can have some disadvantages, especially when you have your class in the evening, because if you have a full day of work, sometimes you can be very tired. And if you're the kind of person that doesn't really work well in the evening, then it might not be for you, because when you start a class at, let's say, 6:30 or 7, then you're very tired, and that means that maybe your concentration will not be as great, so that means you won't retain as much information as you would if you were fully rested. Now, it doesn't mean that a language course will not be good at all for you if you're tired in the evening, but it just means that you will be less focused. So I think it's important to take that into account, because when we're tired, we're less receptive to the information. And the last question I'd like to answer is, do you have any specific objectives in the language? What I'm trying to get at is that in any language course, the teacher has to follow a specific curriculum or content that is dictated by a textbook or the school itself. Typically, modern textbooks will cover useful and meaningful content and vocab or grammar that is useful, with a kind of one-size-fits-all objective. But I would still recommend you look into the course content and check whether the content of the course is appealing to you. It would be a real shame if you started a course, then realized that the content is not really interesting or appealing to you, and then you might end up losing interest or actually withdraw from the course. When I started my Japanese class, I did check the content of the course to make sure that the topics we were going to cover were interesting to me, or that at least I was willing to learn. I really wouldn't have taken the course if I wasn't interested in the content. Because after all, you're going to spend a lot of time learning that language in that course. So if the content is not very exciting to you, then you're not going to be motivated. Usually, most of my students are happy to just learn whatever I teach them. But if you're looking into something more specific like business language or I don't know, whatever you're looking for really, then I think it's worth checking the content of the course. So here we go. I hope you found these questions useful and the answers as well. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment and I will try to answer them as much as I can. I will see you on the next video, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and I will see you later. Bye!